in the beginning, the master's wasn't because I wanted to get it. It was to give myself more time to sort of figure out what I wanted to do and like to give myself the skills to get a job. It worked out in the end perfectly. But if you want to be, I think, really good at what you do, then it won't hurt to learn more than you are already learning outside of the classroom. And that really goes for anything.
This episode of Ken's Nearest Neighbors is powered by Z by HP, HP's high compute, workstation grade line of products and solutions. Today, I had the pleasure of interviewing Andres Slaughter. Andres is a digital marketing specialist who's worked in various capacities for over the last 5 years. He's worked in several sectors including technology, education, and food services, with nearly 10 years of experience in marketing. He also runs a YouTube channel called Andres Slaughter, where he discusses the oddities in life and dives into topics to improve your life. He also is a part-time content creator known as Stats Panda on Instagram and Reddit, where he makes data visualizations about interesting topics. He is the single youngest person ever to receive a graduate degree in the state of Oklahoma and one of the youngest managers of a Global 300 company, Compass Group. In today's episode, we talk about how Andres was able to grow and manage an online community around his data visualizations. We also learn about what makes a compelling data visualization to begin with. And finally, we touch on how he was able to land on the front page of Reddit multiple times. I enjoy talking with Andres. I learned a lot, and hopefully you will as well. Andres, thank you so much for coming on the Ken's Nearest Neighbors podcast. I actually found out about you through Reddit on Data is Beautiful, and I was like, wow, this guy's really making a name for himself here. I thought you'd be an incredible kind of case study and background for the podcast, and I'm so glad you actually responded to my Reddit message.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for reaching out.
Yeah, no problem. So in order for people to sort of get a better understanding of your story and your background, can you tell me about how you first got interested in data? You know, like what was that experience like? Was it just this like a one pivotal moment, or was it a sort of slow progression over time?
I'd say there was a sort of awakening. It started during my undergraduate career. I was getting my degree. I've never been good at math, and it's always been the crux of my academics. But I took a statistics course, and I was like, this is new. This is amazing. You know, diving into really simple things like using SPSS and building models that way in Excel opened up this whole new world of you don't have to be great at math to be, you know, a data scientist necessarily. And it intrigued me moving forward. Once I started to get my master's degree, my MBA, took some advanced data courses. And again, the intrigue continued, and it carried on to a curiosity of maybe how I could turn this into something that I could use for myself. I never thought of it as being like a career choice or path, but definitely like a tool I could use moving forward for whatever career path I chose to go down.
I really like that. I think that I had a very similar experience when I took my first statistics class, and I actually ended up in college taking, I think it's 3 or 4 statistics courses, all like the same level. So I changed majors a lot, and when you change majors, there's like a statistics for business, statistics for health, exercise science, research methods, and statistics for psychology. So I ended up taking virtually the same course a bunch of times, and I realized that like this isn't the math that I learned about, you know, with not like algebra, but with like geometry and calculus and those types of things. Mm-hmm. To me, there's something really actionable about statistics, and that to me is what really drew it to me. You know, I actually have been having to use quite a lot of trigonometry for creating some visuals. I've been experimenting with this tool Manim, but outside of that, I don't think I've used any of that in my adult life. I'm really interested here. You know, you said you did your MBA. You know, how is your like academic and sort of professional career progressed? Like, how do you use data in your life right now, if you even do use data in your career?
Yeah, absolutely. So I had a couple jobs during college that really allowed me to like take advantage of the stuff that I was learning in class, which albeit didn't happen as much as I wanted it to. Not a knock on college. I loved it. But the data side of things really took picture in my mind when I was doing, you know, editing and sort of putting together stories for people. I was wondering how I could tie together their data points in terms of like how they spoke into like a story that people would want to watch. And ultimately that led me down the path of getting some marketing internships, and a lot of marketing jobs have to do with like research and analyzing the data to put together some actionable projections moving forward. And that sort of led me along the lines of like moving past these internships in the marketing field to getting a marketing management position at a fairly young age. And I think, you know, thanks to the understanding that I wasn't great at math, but you don't have to be, to finding a love for like the field of data and using those skills that I've picked up along the way in the classes, and then doing a little bit off course research, which I'm really thankful for, because it's carried over into some soft skills that I use for my job that I think has kept me in this position longer than I probably should be. Just don't tell my employer that. So it's been honestly really great. I've loved it.
That's incredible. It's like, what do you study, like business, marketing management? Obviously you did your MBA, but what did you study in like undergrad?
So surprisingly, and this surprises everybody, even myself, as much as I love marketing, like it's my passion and I think I'll carry it to the grave. I only took one marketing class through both my degrees. It's been plain Jane business administration with, you know, sprinkling in some Dungeons and Dragons extracurricular courses to get done as quick as possible. So it's really just my bachelor's of science, and then I went on to get my MBA. Really super simple business stuff, but I've always had an interest for marketing, and a lot of what I learned that I use for my jobs has been, you know, outside of the classroom. I'd say 99% of what I've learned and how I know how to do marketing has been through courses like on Skillshare and Udemy. And I couldn't be more thankful for like having the insight to be like, oh crap, like what am I supposed to do once I graduate if I want to do marketing? And I haven't taken any classes. So it's been a blessing.
So how do you balance that? So obviously you have an advanced degree, and you were, if I recall correctly, the youngest person with a graduate degree in the state of Oklahoma. I see that smug smile, but you know, you're also saying that you learn the majority of the things that you learned come from outside the classroom. You know, like how does that balance out in your mind? Like what does that mean to you, that like, hey, you were able to excel in school, you were able to get these degrees and do well there, but you also learned so much outside of the classroom?
Yeah, I think it's a weird sort of ironic situation that I put myself in. I would never tell anybody not to go to college. I think a lot of people that go to college end up learning what they need to. Not that you get the most out of it for the money that you put in. Hot take, but for me specifically, the university that I went to was due to the fact that I was there on a track scholarship. So it wasn't my like ideal school if I wanted to learn the most I could about marketing. But as the situation had it, they offered me the most money to run. And so I decided I'll take that. I'll go do that and explore the marketing opportunities that they presented, which resulted in one class, amazing professor, and then she left the next semester. So I kind of all went downhill. And then I realized, you know, if I want to make a career out of this with the time that I have left, because I'm already on this fast track, right? So I have 2 years of undergrad, and then I have to either get a job or take some time off or get my master's. So in the beginning, the master's wasn't because I wanted to get it. It was to give myself more time to sort of figure out what I wanted to do and like to give myself the skills to get a job. It worked out in the end perfectly. But if you want to be, I think, really good at what you do, then it won't hurt to learn more than you are already learning outside of the classroom. And that really goes for anything. I think even if I specialized in marketing, there's always more to learn, especially when there's so many resources online in the 21st century. The fact that I was able to take advantage of some meant a lot moving forward.
That's incredible. Did you also run in your while you were doing your MBA, or was
no?
Okay.
I got out of there. I couldn't do it. Again,
You ran
anybody
out
that
of there.
runs and says I did. Anybody that says they love running is a liar. Um, it was great. I loved it, but no, it was time to hang it up.
I got you. I know some people. So I played golf in college, right? And some people would finish in 3 years, and then they do a graduate program, and they still have 1 year of eligibility. So they're like, oh, I might as well just kind of hit this ball around this field for another year and do it to it. But I can relate to that. I firmly do not enjoy running. So no, that's awesome. I think something that is really relevant to me with your story here is that as we, when you're in school, right, you learn a lot of things, but that's the baseline that essentially everyone learns, depending on what school you go to and a lot of those things. It's really what you do with that information, whether you take it into internships or whether you do projects or whether you are supplementing that with other coursework to make you as desirable as possible to employers or to fill out gaps that you think are really interesting. That's where the secret sauce is. That's what actually makes you employable or gives you the abilities to create something special on your own. Yeah. And a lot of people, especially in the data domain, they're like, oh, should I get this master's in data science? And the answer is, if you can afford it, and also if you're actually going to do something with it, you're not just going to go and show up to classes. Like, I look at a lot of these programs as things that buy time to be able to build out your skills, to be able to build out a portfolio, to be able to practice this in a dedicated environment, rather than it's like saying, oh, I'm starting to work, I have to focus X amount of hours on work, and then I'm going to be tired, so I won't be able to do that. In my mind, school has always been, I'm buying time so I can build out the skills to create the exact future that I want. And I did go back to school quite a bit. So I was trying to buy a lot of time, I guess. So speaking of, building skills outside of school, you're obviously very well known on Reddit. You've been on the first page of Reddit multiple times, if I remember correctly. And I'm wondering how that started. Obviously it's related to data visualization, but what gave you the idea? What made you want to start posting on that medium specifically?
Interesting story. And it's something that I can remember like it happened yesterday. So there was this one day while I was in the first semester of my MBA, and I had just finished watching the episode of Rick and Morty with the squirrels. And I don't even remember the entire premise of it, but the fact that there were so many squirrels on planet Earth, and if they had intelligence, they could turn on us. And it stuck with me while I was in class. I don't know what we learned that day at all, but the thing that stuck with me the most, the squirrels. And I said, you know what, it'd be interesting to know how many squirrels are in the US. And then I realized, like, I could make a visualization. I've seen a lot of them on Instagram. The explore page is what opened me up to this world. I would see something about sports or about like how to diversify your portfolio, and they were all some sort of graph or chart. And I was like, it can't be that hard to make it. And so the beginning of this started with friends and family. So I wanted to do this correctly because I knew it could be something that I could be good at. I had the skills to make it what I wanted it to be. And so I created a Google form and I sent it to 50 people, and I had them pick between like several names. Stats Panda was one of them, and the logo. I actually had somebody, a freelancer, make that logo for me, and I gave them a bunch of choices for the logo. And it almost wasn't Stats Panda. It was almost something completely different. I think it was like bamboo poles or something. It was something outlandish, but it ended up all working out. They chose the face of what Stats Panda is and the name exactly like that. And I was like, okay, perfect. Now I have like the foundation. And so I started creating content based on what I was seeing on Reddit after I found out that Data is Beautiful existed. And there was this whole community of God, it must be up to 20 million people now existed. I had a platform. That was the foundation for my voice, for my content. And I started making things based on like what was relevant. And the content is archived now. Nobody can find it, but it started out almost as like screenshots of other people's graphs, and then I would put text around it. So like stealing content basically. But I just found it so interesting. And this was like sort of the plug in between the content that I was making. And it sort of evolved into this community of nearly 10,000 people that are from all over the world that very much enjoy what I make, but have active conversation in the comment section. Not all great, but it's something that I've really started to appreciate the more it's evolved.
I really like that. And something I wouldn't say unique to Reddit, but something that is highlighted in Reddit is sort of the anonymity side of it. I mean, I can't post in one of the data science and machine learning platforms because I get crucified. There's like this big stigma in those communities about sharing your own work. And I find it just like it's not a sphere that I have cracked or I plan to crack, but I'm interested in how you found specific success there and, what that story is like. Like, what do people resonate with in that domain?
So I think sort of the most that I've learned outside of actually, diving into like how to make visualizations the correct way has been through the comment sections of Reddit. They're ruthless and they show no mercy. And in fact, in all seriousness, like I made a post back during the 2020 elections, I think, when Kanye West was receiving votes. And I made a visualization that reached the front page. I think it was one of the first times, if not the first time, that my content was shared worldwide. And I had that sort of that reach that everybody was able to see. And that meant that they were able to give their opinion on it. And I remember going through the thousands of comments and, Reddit, the top comments have stand out the most because they have the most likes. And some of them, if not all of them, were criticisms of how bad the graph was. I didn't use the correct color shading. I didn't represent the data well. I was, it was misleading. I was spreading misinformation. And I remember one comment that just set me over the edge was, he said, "This is pants on head retarded." And I was like, wow, that hurts. Thanks though. And so I started using this as a way to start learning what I'm doing wrong and correct it in the future. Now, there are some people that just absolutely despise me as a person now, which I find kind of admirable. Thank you for that. I've made it to that point. But on Reddit, I sort of started posting my content on there and had the ability to type more of a description than on Instagram. There's no character limit on Reddit, or if there is, I haven't reached it yet. So I was able to tell more of the story, which allowed me to share more of what the graph means, what it represents, and sort of how I went into this process and sort of tell the story. The whole point of like why I started doing this is I wanted to tell a story beyond just what you're seeing. I know the visual part is like super important, right? It's what draws people and it keeps them there. But the story also, I think, is really important for those who want to learn more. Because I know a lot of people don't really read the descriptions, but for those who do, that's what it's there for. And those type of people I want to draw in. And so my process for Reddit is simply posting on the type of subreddits that I think are related to data. A lot of that has to do with like cool guides, data is beautiful, visualization, and then specifically, and this is sort of a hack that people can take with them. For example, I recently did a post about Lego sets, and the data community just brushed it off. They didn't care, got a couple likes. But I posted it in the R Legos group, and they loved it. So I tapped into those niche communities that's what the graph is about, and that seems to really drive home the growth beyond just like what I'm typically doing.
I really like that, and something in there that I think is I don't know, is particularly important is that just you're identifying the audiences that, well, not everyone is going to be your fan, right? Not everyone is going to like everything you do, but the odds are that there's going to be someone that does appreciate your work. And I think that that's pretty powerful. Another thing is the feedback mechanism, right? Although Reddit is absolutely ruthless, I think people shy too far away from quality feedback. Like on my YouTube videos, some people are just like mean, right? Like my last video, I messed up my camera settings for the audio and it didn't sound as good as usual. And they absolutely crucified me for it. They're like, yeah, audio sucks. This is trash, yada, yada, yada. But, I probably, at least on my devices, I didn't notice. And that's an easy thing for me to fix. It's legitimate feedback. It gets old after a while, but like, you know, if you can develop that skill where you take away the sentiment of the message and look at it essentially for what it's worth, to me, that's one of the most valuable things you can have, because you're going to be able to take improvement or criticism at like true face value. Like, is this meaningful? Are they just being mean, or is it constructive? I don't care if it's mean or whatever it is. If it has some way that I can improve my content or I can improve myself, I'll listen to it. Um, so many people are scared of that they're too scared to even post on LinkedIn. And I'm like, people's faces are attached to LinkedIn. Their jobs are attached to
Yeah.
LinkedIn. What are you scared of? No one's going to say anything mean. Like, if you have a typo, they'll let you know. But for example, I had a typo in one of my videos, and like two or three people reached out via email, right? And they're like, before people go crazy, and like get mad at you, like there's these typos, and I'm like, no one's getting mad at me. Like, I appreciate it. Like, this is really like valuable. I want this type of feedback, but like no one in the comment section is being like, you idiot, you spelled organizing wrong. Like, you know.
Yeah,
um,
I couldn't agree more on that.
so something I'm particularly interested in is like building the community. So how do you, aside from posting and doing those things, like what do you do to maintain a community? How do you cater to the needs of a community? And also, outside of it, like how do you choose a platform? Like, obviously Reddit made sense for you because high volume, there's specific subreddits that are relevant, but do you have any like kind of broader level thoughts on that?
I think that this is something I've really struggled with and I've thought about a lot. This was always intended to be something that was community based. So I wasn't making the content. Well, I was making the content because I loved it, but that was 50% of it. The other part was because I wanted to build a place where people could come together and see the type of content that I was sharing and sort of talk to like-minded people, whether it's in the comment sections or in the subreddit. Um, I think a large part of picking the right platform has to do with obviously the type of content. Though the results may vary. What I mean by that is like if your goal is to build a community, then you probably shouldn't choose Reddit. While to get the most reach, the most amount of impressions that you possibly can, while increasing your karma score for whatever that's worth, Reddit's your man. And I guess technically offsite, it's given me the most opportunities. What I mean by that is the people that reach out from like Business Insider or MSN or some other smaller media organizations to do some articles all found my stuff on Reddit, which is fantastic. Unfortunately, I can't really change my name. I would love it to be Stats Panda, but that Reddit was made a long time ago. So it's a different name, Dre Marius, which now I'm associated with. So there's sort of this like, I've made a mistake, but I'm too far in to fix it now. So it is what it is. So that was something I've had to learn to deal with, because it's almost like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, because they're just two different people doing the same type of thing. So with me and Instagram, it's sort of it's my baby. I love Instagram. I love the amount of insight that I could, derive from each post. So I can see like where it's been shared, who's sharing it, how many times, where it's going, the reach, engagement, stuff like that. And it helps me, those metrics help me drive my content. It's what has made me pick the type of content that I'm posting now. And more specifically, the comments are less about somebody's opinion and more about the type of content that's being posted, what the actual content is, and if they have any values that they've drawn from it, what that value is. And it's specifically in the direct messages, people have, giving me feedback on terms like, maybe this could have been better because of this, or I love your page, man, you should definitely do something about this. And that's sort of the community that I've always wanted to build. In the beginning, there were several people that have stuck around as I've grown that have been just as active. And I remember that. And it's grown to like a handful of people that I can call true fans that just love my work and don't, go to bed dreaming about me. But when they wake up and they see that I've posted, they're like, heck yeah, my day just got like well, I wouldn't say 10%, but like 9%
Marginally
better.
better.
Marginally better, yes.
This episode of Ken's Nearest Neighbors is brought to you by Z by HP. HP's high compute, workstation grade line of products and solutions. Z is specifically made for high performance data science solutions, and I personally use the ZBook Studio and the Z4 workstation. I really love that the Z line can come standard with Linux, and they also can be configured with the data science software stack. With the software stack, you can get right to the work of doing data science on day one without the overhead of having to completely reconfigure your new machine. Now back to our show. I really like that. I mean, I am constantly thinking about platform, and I think anyone that's looking to build communities or share their work, that's one of the most important decisions you can make. I mean, I got really lucky as a data scientist that I started on YouTube, right? Like, I didn't expect to make YouTube videos a lot of the time, right? I just put one up and it did pretty well. But the thing with me is I could see so many metrics associated with that video, right? Like, that became something that I was already excited about as data. What if I could combine this hobby or a passion with all of the data that's out there? To me, that was an incredible journey that I was just starting on. It's like every video I made, I could analyze it, right? Like, it was like more, the data is content for me to consume and to understand. And like, that positive feedback loop to me was incredible. It's like, oh, I make this video, which I enjoy doing. I get to see the data from the video and I get to analyze it and see what that means for the next video. And there's this really cool momentum that's created associated with those things. And, you know, I'm for me, YouTube was the perfect marriage, right? For other people, it might be LinkedIn, right? If someone's very scared of criticism, like, LinkedIn is really a great place to post a lot of content. If you're looking to grow professionally, same thing. LinkedIn is an awesome place. If you want to just berate people, Twitter is a great place. So,
Oh yeah.
So, you know, I think that there's some, I don't know, there's just like a lot of beauty in the medium that we choose, and I think people should be really mindful of that. And I also think that we shouldn't just spread on every medium. Like, I've been very careful that as much as I'd like to get on some of the platforms that are growing quickly, for example, like TikTok, that's not the style of content that I've necessarily mastered yet.
Right.
Not that I've mastered YouTube content by any means, but it's like the additional effort I'd have to put into that would detract from the content that I produce on the other platforms that I'm stronger on. And so, you know, maybe it's better to focus on one or two first and let those carry your growth. I mean, it's not like Reddit does not bleed into Instagram, right? Or Instagram doesn't bleed into these other platforms. So for me, again, I can't stress enough, like, choosing medium is really powerful. I am interested. Obviously, your stuff focuses on data visualization. How did you pick up those data viz skills?
A lot of practice. So early on, like I said, while I was finishing my undergrad, a lot of the jobs that I had involved video editing and scripting, and that also meant that I had to pick up some graphic design skills because they needed that in the stories, and that sort of, you know, brought me into this realm of like, well, I can create whatever I want. I just have to know how to do it. And along with everything that I picked up in the classes, you know, learning, you know, how to use data, how to manipulate it, and how to tell a story through a visualization, even if you couldn't add a description to it, was really important. And as much as I would have loved to have used like Tableau, I'm broke, so I can't. I was broke and I am broke, so I still can't.
That's student free subscription, man.
I know. Hindsight's 2020.
Exactly.
But I used everything that was available to me, which meant that I was using a lot of like websites made specifically for creating data visualizations. And, you know, they sort of really just walked me through how to do that. And I'd say that a lot of what I do is done the correct way. But for example, I do this sort of like bubble tier chart, which almost isn't even really a visualization that relates to data. It's almost sort of like just a guide, but I still consider it sometimes that I'm using data points, and I've convinced myself that that's what it is. And I will not be deterred. So I continue to do this, right? And so I've picked up a lot of, like I said, how I picked up marketing skills and all the knowledge that I needed was sort of outside the classroom, learning on all these websites, typically just doing Google searches when I wanted to learn more about how to do something. Now, I would have loved to learn how to create visualizations through Python, but my programming skills have gone away. I used to know how to do somewhat and to get things done that I needed to get done, but now it's left me, like my ability to run. But both I do not miss, and I'll continue to do what I'm doing now because, I mean, it works for me, which I'm really thankful for as well.
Yeah, well, I think something that people get way too wrapped up on is the tools, right? I mean, I think you were telling me offline you were using Excel and Canva and some other stuff that, a data scientist or someone might scoff at, right? But the beauty is that, your visuals are being viewed thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of times and interacted with so much. Like, is that what matters? Or is the tool that you used, is that what matters? No, it's like how compelling the visual is, how much people are going to engage with it and resonate with it. And I think that that's something that for anyone starting out is an unbelievably powerful lesson, is like, it's what you create. It's not necessarily how you got there. I mean, for the scientific method, yes, it is how you got there. Like, you have to be right.
Right.
But like the outcome, I mean, some of the visuals that I've made, it's like, okay, I started it in Python, but it was just easier for me to add all of the labels and all those things in PowerPoint or something like that. Right. The impact on the client was the exact same. And the number of hours that it took me to do was significantly less because I used some of these other tools.
Right.
And, if you care about replicability, that's one thing. But if you care about like bottom line impact, which I think business people, which I think most data scientists also should care about, no one really cares how you got there.
Yeah, true. For me, and again, you hit on this. What I do is very simple, and I think that's what makes it so successful. It resonates with the people that don't have the same understanding as me or as you, or as people that are well versed in the community. It's just for anybody. It could be my grandmother could enjoy it just as much as you could or I could, and I think that's really important. And it wasn't the goal, and I didn't have that goal in mind when I started making them, but I wanted the visualization to be as simple looking as possible. I kind of took inspiration from Apple. Everything you see from the website to the product is very simple. The user interface and user experience is for all. And I took that to heart. And that's sort of my mission, is to make all of the graphs that I make, all the content that I make, as simple to understand and look at as possible. And I think that's what makes it easy to share with your friends. That you don't have to be like, oh, my friend's not going to get this. They're dumb as rocks. But even if they're dumb, which they probably aren't, they're super smart, they could get it. And I carry that with everything I do. In fact, I probably have reverted to as simple as you can get before it's almost like questionable content. Like, did my mother's kindergartners make this? Maybe. And there's three things that I'd like to touch on that go into how I make the type of content that I do. And that I think was missing, and sort of how I've carved out this little space on the internet. The first one is some humor. I got to add a little bit of comedy, whether it's in like the type of content that's being posted or it's the description of the actual visualization. So for example, the Kanye West one that I did, super simple graph, but I added Kanye West's face at the very bottom as if he's like peeking up at you. And people loved it. They were like, Kanye's always watching, Big Brother, stuff like that, which was kind of weird, but like, that's kind of what I was going for. And that type of stuff is like, oh, this guy's pretty funny. And they might even forget what the content's about, but the fact that they can remember, oh, this guy's super funny, they might bring them back. It sort of leaves a bigger impression. And then the second one is, I think, the most important, and it's sort of like telling a story beyond what you're actually seeing. So like, yes, the content, the visualization is there. You can derive some sort of message or bring like some value to it for yourself, but to tell a story of like why I'm doing this, what's happening, why the data is the way that it is, and sort of maybe like a history of how we got here. Like, for example, one that I recently did was the most popular MCU actors in terms of Instagram followers. Well, it wasn't the same 5 years ago. In fact, the type of people that are on there today, probably you would have never guessed. Like Miley Cyrus was the top one. People don't even know who she plays. And that sort of stuff I really love telling the story about, because if you see it and you're like, oh, that's kind of interesting. But if you read about it and you're like, oh man, that's so interesting. That's sort of like what I'm pushing for. And finally, the third one is like, I think something everybody should live by, is you have to do it right. So like I had struggled early on trying not to spread misinformation. And I got knocked for it because I didn't do my research early on, right? And I was, maybe doing things that like weren't like in the best interest of the public, which meant that like it was just straight up wrong. And I've sort of learned that like you can't do that, especially if you have an audience. Like it's got to be correct. Those three things is what I carry into like everything that I do, which is super important to me. And sort of like, I think you need to have some sort of rules and guidelines for like how you create your content, especially if like people can use that to share with other people. Is in this day and age is super important.
Well, I think that the personal evolution is really powerful to see, right? It's that, hey, I've learned this and we've been able to like improve the quality of the content. That's like a big lesson learned. And I mean, it's something I'm super mindful of too, is like if I spread misinformation, I'm probably doing more harm than good. Right. And that's not, I think, what any of our goals are. I actually have this. I've been reading this every day. So I wrote this down. It says, you do everything how you do anything. And I try to remember that. It's like, even when I'm like sending emails, I'm doing something stupid. It's like, I should do my due diligence. I should take the time. I should like focus on it, because that's a habit, right? It's a habit we create is if we're just like half-assing the research, like, oh, but I want to get the views first. I want to jump there. That isn't great for the long-term success of essentially any of the things that we build and we put out there. I really like all of those ideas and how you're able to, I just kind of synthesize. I was going to ask you what makes a compelling data visualization, but it seems like you beat me to it. Something I've noticed is that a lot of your data visualizations, you're taking very similar graphics and you're putting new information in. I think that a lot of people are scared to do something like that. But to me, it's like, hey, this formula works. If people get it, why don't you just continue to use it? How do you feel about that? I mean, obviously you do experiment, you do create new things, but there seems to be things that are tried and true. And, is that something you've done by design, or kind of walk me through that a little bit?
Early on in this journey, what I do now wasn't what it was. And like I said, bringing it back to what I've archived, there was a method to the madness in terms of like what worked and what didn't work. In the beginning, I was sort of making any sort of visualization that I could, any sort of graph, chart, you name it. I really, in the beginning, cared about what was like the value you could draw from it rather than like the type. And I think I started to realize that some did better than others. And especially early on when I wasn't just using my content, I would take other people's content that they had made and make it my own in terms of like the style and the branding. And I would learn that that did pretty well too. And so what I've started to do, I sort of found my rhythm, my road in the data visualization is, I think specifically for me, 3 different types of charts. And I've talked about this before. So the bubble tier, which again is not technically, I wouldn't like, you would call it like the ugly stepchild, because like it's not really official, but it's like something that people love. And especially when it comes to like stuff that you could technically call something else, like a guide, or like you could hang it up as on a poster. There's a visualization subreddit just specifically for things made for walls. And I put that on there too, because technically that data and the stuff that I put on there is going to be what it is forever. It's not going to change, right? And then the 2 other ones are just simple types of ways to visualize data. So it's like horizontal and vertical line graphs, which people have loved on Data is Beautiful, and it's really easy and simple to understand. I've seen a lot of really complex charts on that subreddit that not to say that they try too hard, but again, you have to explain it if you want it to be well known and shared through different communities and media channels. You have to explain it in layman terms. It's sort of like the poor man's chart. They have to be able to understand it, whether they have a lot of experience or no experience. And so when I make these, I found that those three types of charts, along with like maps, so like US maps work the best. I started out using like world maps, specific countries, but my audience is 70 to 80% in America. I have some Canadian fans, some people from Europe, from Asia, but for the most part, they're in the States and they want, US data. They want stuff that, relates to them or their state. And so those three different types, I think, work the best. And I've started to learn that sort of not clickbait, because you can't really do that, but if you sensationalize the data in terms of like the title, so you make it as intriguing as possible without having to like lie to them or to the audience, it works really well. So what I mean is that I might do something that I wouldn't normally do. For example, I hate talking about billionaires. They get enough attention, but people love to know how they made their money. They like to know where they're from, or if their state has a lot of billionaires, or perhaps like maybe what kind of companies or businesses they've opened up. And so like the billionaire niche for using those as data points seems to be like loved by all. And it's in fact like the data visualization that's been shared the most out of all the content that I've created. It's been billionaire stuff, which I will carry forward. But also I think you have to draw a line somewhere, right? Like what works and what you want to do, even though it doesn't do well, is something that you just have to come to accept, right? A lot of what I love doing, I've stopped doing because it doesn't do well. And will I ever get back on that path of doing what I wanted to do originally? Probably not. I've built up a community of people that enjoy the content that they're getting now, which is fine. I'm here to serve. But again, some people wouldn't do that. And it's just sort of something that you have to figure out and make the decision before it's too late.
Wow. So there's two things. I think something that's a common theme in this conversation is the sort of like reductionist mindset of simplicity is what people are looking for in data visualizations, right? I mean, why do we create a visual in the first place? Is to simplify data, right? Is to make it easier to talk about. It's something that I think people get really distracted by. I mean, there's this huge tendency to overcomplicate things, especially in the data domain. And what I'm hearing is that what makes people pay attention to a data visualization is first the simplicity, and second the relevance to them. That's what you're describing, is kind of going and creating content that is relevant to your audience. I personally have like a trade-off and a conflict between this, and I can only find motivation to create if I'm very excited about making the content. So on YouTube, I'd say all of my content that I make is still something that I am excited about making. And I've made quite a few videos that I wanted to make that I felt like they should be out there, even though I knew no one was going to watch them. Right. I made a video about why I think everyone should start a podcast. No one watched it. Still one of the videos that I'm most proud of. Right. And, to me, it's interesting. How do you motivate if the things that you're creating aren't exactly like what you're as excited about putting out there? I mean, obviously you're still excited about putting out there, but how do you make that trade-off in your head?
Right. Yeah. I think that's sort of turned into like an expansion of how do you find more of what you love doing? Even if what you
in
like
line with,
yeah. In terms of like, what do you love doing? And what's sort of aligned with your passions? This is still something I absolutely love doing. But I want to find
Thank you.
that there is possible in terms of the type of content I create. And I think that's where I've expanded into doing other things. You've talked about you shouldn't expand upon or across all mediums. You shouldn't do all media channels. And I agree. I would love to do reels on TikTok or on Instagram and do TikToks, but I don't think I should, and I don't want to. I'll stay away from TikTok for now. But YouTube's another thing that I want more of myself to be shared with the world and talk about like what I want. And as much as I love doing what I'm doing, it's sort of steered by the community, right? Which is absolutely fine. That's sort of how I wanted it to go. They sort of tell me based on like their reactions and engagement, like what they want to see, what I shouldn't do, how I should plan going forward, which makes my job easier in some sense and in some regards. Like I don't have to worry about like making this graph because they already want me to make it. I have to worry about like, oh, should I post this? Well, I don't know if they're gonna like it. They've already asked for it. Not directly, but based on like their engagement. And I think that's really important, especially when like at this point, I'm not going to revert back to like losing followers. So it's growing daily. And the fact that more people are coming in, seeing what's already being shown and like, wow, this has had a lot of likes. Well, I love it too. Carries forward. I think it's like just them guiding the channel as a whole, not 100%, but a large part of it.
Awesome. I really like that. Well, let's talk about YouTube. What are you planning to do next? Where are you trying to grow? Like, what's next for you here?
What's next is something that's sort of already started. It's been like sort of like an annoyance in the back of my mind of like express your creativity, sort of do what you want to do. And that's been in YouTube. I love how people are able to tell stories on YouTube, and it's not like I love movies. Like I'm a movie nut. I could spend hours in my bed just watching movies. I love like storytelling and how people express their creativity. And I think people don't realize like how hard it is to make like a YouTube video. Like obviously it's not hard to do, but like to execute and to find like your rhythm and like what you're good at doing and to like maximize all your capabilities and minimize your workflow so you can get content out as quickly as possible. Quality content is truly a skill. And I've been mastering what I can for the past 5 years and put out type of content that I wanted to at the time. But moving forward, I think YouTube is sort of where I'm going to shift to next. And it probably won't be data related, but more of lifestyle, of answering questions that people might never ask their friends, but they might Google it. Is sort of where I'm leaning to. Sort of like a Matt Diavella is sort of the type of person that I relate to a lot. And that is sort of something that excites me. I wake up every day and think, I cannot wait to film. In fact, I have camera equipment all over my house for all the B-roll shots, for all the B-roll shots that I need. And I just really think that that's sort of like what I want to do moving forward, and perhaps like maybe even make a career out of it one day if I get that far.
Awesome. Well, I mean, it's very clear that you're a good storyteller already. I think you've been able to show that very compellingly with data. And, I don't think that that's a far leap to do that with the kind of spoken voice and with B-roll and with video. And so a very natural segue for you. One last thing I want to touch on is, you've talked about how earlier in your Reddit career, you were borrowing other people's visuals and marking them up. And obviously, I mean, that's not something, if you're not accrediting, that's not something we want to be doing. But I would imagine a lot of people are taking the work that you do now and are taking credit for it. How do you manage that? How do you handle that? And, what is the thought process around that?
Depending on the type of post, like for example, how well the post does, I did an AirPods one that probably is my most shared across the internet. And for like the love of God, like I cannot track it all. And I know it's stolen by people I will never find. And that's fine. You know what? Congratulations, you can have it. I take the first reaction and feeling is flattery, but then again, it builds into annoyance. And then I'm ultimately pissed. If I can track them down, the account or the person, I'll sort of approach them and say like, could you give me credit? Or could you take that down? And the lengths that some people go to like steal content and to make it their own baffles me. They'll flip it upside down vertically, like shift like the axis like a couple degrees, which I guess makes it theirs in their mind. But typically, usually I'll reach out and say, that's not cool. Go make your own. It's not that hard. And if it's on Instagram specifically, I have a quick story of like somebody took my content and I found it through somebody sending it to me, one of my followers. And then I posted on my story and said, like, this is not cool. Do not do this, guys. This person is a bad person. And then I didn't expect that was the extent of what I thought it was going to be. And then all my followers like barraged this man with like, just not hate, but like, take it down. Like, how could you? Stats Panda's never done anything wrong. And I'm like, thank you. Wrong, but thank you. And they took it down, which I think if I could do for everything, that would be awesome. But again, it's just sort of something you have to deal with and accept. Like, you can't stop all the content that you post from being, taken and manipulated in some way. But if you can manage and mitigate that it happening as much as you can, that's really all you can do, especially as you grow more and more. But absolutely not a fan. Do not steal people's content.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's something that's always baffled me because, let's say you have a good Instagram following and someone shares your work and they give you credit for it. Like, whenever someone shares my work, I'm like, hey, like, I, retweet it or share it on my story or do whatever. And so it's like, if you're trying to grow your brand, you get so much more out of celebrating other people's work rather than stealing it. Or like, because then there's just more pressure on you to steal other people's work again and prove that you're this like brilliant, whatever it is. And that's just not sustainable for long-term growth. I just have never understood it. There's plenty of people who have massive followings on these social platforms. Literally all they do is just share people's work and give them credit for it. Right. And it's not that hard. And they've grown incredible brands. Like, hey, this person has their hand on the pulse of whatever's going on in the community. They're always sharing really cool stuff. Like, that's a great way to be a like citizen of these communities without stomping on anyone's feet, on toes or fingers or whatever it is. And I would encourage more people to do it that way rather than, than another way. And hopefully that's a positive message to leave everyone on. Those are all the questions I had. Do you have any additional things you wanted to touch on? Anything that you're working on you wanted to share aside from YouTube?
No, honestly, we've covered it all. Again, I really thank you for the opportunity, and I hope we've covered a lot of useful and insightful topics here.
I think we definitely have. Thank you again for coming on.